Of the ocean for a long time. On the 19th day, two of the men decide to kill the third man and eat his flesh for sustenance. A few days later, they are rescued. This house will charge the men with murder. Before I go on, I would like to introduce the distinguished educators for today's debate. Our chief educator is Encik Nur Khalis Muhyiddin. Encik Abdul Rahman Rustam. And our third educator is Puan Fatin Raya Ismail. And the two states that I'm debating today are Sabah, which is the government, and Selangor, which is the opposition. Okay. Before I go on, the timekeepers for today are Puan Negeri Vijay Kumar and Cik Nodellawati. Just a little reminder on the time. The timekeepers will ensure the first, second, and third speakers each are given 8 minutes to speak. The timekeepers will ring the bell once for the first minute. At the end of the 7th minute, you signal the time allocated for each speaker. At the end of the 8th minute, the bell will be rung twice. Okay, and here, right? Okay, and the maximum of 3 minutes will be given to both teams to prepare for the reply speech. And the time allocated for reply speech is 4 minutes. Okay. So during the reply speech, the timekeeper will again ring the bell once. Okay. At the 3rd minute, to signal that the time has 1 minute left, and on the 4th minute, the bell will be rung twice. Okay. Now let me introduce the debaters for today. On my right, for the government, representing the Prime Minister is Chan Pui-Yun. Deputy Prime Minister Muhammad Daniel bin Sulaiman. And the Third Minister is Dura Khadijah bin Raja. And the reserves are Clarice Chong Yanti and Irene Junior Victor. Right. On my left is the opposition. Representing our opposition leader is Imran Daniel bin Desmond. Second opposition speaker, Cheryl Tan Bin. And the third opposition speaker will be Daryl Tan Bin. Okay, and the reserves are Kavin Narasi Tawanendran and Muhammad Aaron Lyons. Okay, the other rules were read much earlier, so I think you are aware of all the others. So we will not go into that. So without much without further ado, okay, I call upon the Prime Minister from the government, Ms. Khan.
A very good afternoon to the panel of the adjudicators, timekeepers, my equals, the opposition, and also Madam Speaker. Salutation and greetings, I bid you all. Now, as the government, we the government strongly agree with the motion presented today, which is this House should charge the two men with murder, because the action of taking someone's life is still murder despite of the circumstances, as we see all human life as equal. Now, let me introduce to you our government side, which is I, as the Prime Minister here. My name is Chan Pui-Yun, and will be continued by our Deputy Minister, which is Muhammad Daniel, and then our Minister, which is Dura Khadijah, will then obliterate all the arguments given by the opposition. Let me start off by giving our acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the two men were acted in desperation. Therefore, we are not charging them the life sentence. And we fundamentally believe that these men were good men. They were only acting out of desperation because they were hungry. But we still believe that murder is still murder, like we stated in our sentence earlier. A life is still taken away. And that is why we view murder is still murder, regardless of any circumstance. It doesn't matter if they're starving or out of desperation. However, we do charge them with first degree of murder under an exception, which is that we believe that they were in act out of desperation. Now let us give the definition of today's motion. Firstly, we would like to highlight a few of the keywords from the motion. Number one, which is decide. to think carefully about the different possibilities that are available and chose one of them. The next one we would like to define is the word kill, which is to make something die. The third one, which is the sustenance, the food and drink that people and animals and plants need to sustain themselves and stay healthy. That is our definition on today's motion and the key term that we would like to highlight in this today's motion. Now let us introduce to you our case line on today's motion from the government side. Because the motion stated that the men actually decided to kill the third man. Therefore, it means that it was actually premeditated and actually planned beforehand. That is our case line on today's motion from the government side. Now let me introduce to you our first point, which is the law doesn't exclude starvation, which means that it doesn't matter if they were starving or if they were in desperation, it's still murder. It's still, a life is still taken away. But we already said it in our stand that we truly believe, this is what we, the government side, actually believe in, is that it doesn't matter what it is, a murder is actually still murder. And that no matter how hungry they are, the life is still died, correct? The third man actually died. Therefore, that is why we totally believe in our first point, is that the law doesn't actually exclude starvation, and this is actually why it links to our stand, which is the stand.
So in the status quo, according to the law, there are things that there are laws for crimes of necessities. So if you recognize that they did it out of desperation, why then are you prosecuting them for the murder?
Thank you for PI. Do you mind explaining the law?
In the status quo, there are laws for crimes of necessities. So if you recognize that they are doing it out of desperation, why then are you prosecuting them for murder?
Well, our answer at the government side is that the law doesn't actually exclude starvation. There is no necessity. There's no way to justify a life is killed. Someone already died. There's no way to justify how someone is died out of necessity. There is no necessity to kill someone. Now that is why we will be introducing our second point. It's a very good question because it links to our second point. Is that the second point is that there are still alternative ways instead of murdering someone. This is that we highlight is that it's not necessary to kill someone. It doesn't matter what the circumstances is. You cannot justify a killing. There's no way we can justify killing. It doesn't matter what the situation is. This is what we truly actually believe in. And then, what is the alternative way that they could have done instead of taking someone's life away? Well, they could have actually just skinned themselves. Why do they need to kill the third man? When they can just skin themselves, or when they can just eat the flesh without killing someone, right? And also that it doesn't matter that even though that they will still be charged with murder, which is the opposition is suggesting is that the men still could have died. The chance of them all surviving would be higher. Now this is our second point, is that they could have sustained themselves without harming, which is why we truly believe that the killing isn't necessary. That is in our second point. There's no way that you can justify killing, doesn't matter the circumstance, it links back to our stand. That doesn't actually matter how it is, right? One of the alternative ways that we provide could have actually prevented this murder. If we don't want to charge them, then why didn't they just use the smarter way? For example, they can just skin themselves, or they can just eat part of their flesh without actually taking the life away. That is why.
In your work, where you say that individuals have to cut their own flesh, but they're in the middle of the ocean with limited tools, they will be bleeding a lot. So are you suggesting that all these 3 individuals should die?
No. Thank you for your eye, but the answer is no. Yeah, you're right, they are limited tools, then how can they cut their flesh? Well, how can they explain they are limited tools? How can they kill the third man? Right? How can they kill the third man with the limited tools? If they can kill a man with the limited tools, then they can kill the man. Then they can cut off the flesh with the limited tools that the opposition is also suggesting. That is what we at the government side believe in, and that is why we should That is why we should charge these 2 men with murder. Because again, murder is murder. It doesn't matter what the circumstances is. And that is why I would also like to reinstate and re-strengthen our stand, just to give a clarification of what the government side actually believes in. We, the government, strongly agree with the motion. Why? Because no matter what the murder is, it still life is still murder. And again, we view life as equal. It doesn't matter, like, this is, well, there are the circumstances, whatever. But no, we're not charging them full life sentence because they're under exception. Because we do acknowledge that the man, they were acting out of desperation. We do acknowledge that. That is why, as we can see in light of this, the motion, is that these men, they were just very acting out of desperation. And that is why we give them an exception to basically not giving them full life sentence, but they are still charged with first degree murder. They're still charged, but under exception because we acknowledge the situation that they were in. Now, that is all from the government side.
I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. It is very easy for government to sit there with their bottles of water in their hand and say that these men weren't justified in killing these people. Ladies and gentlemen and panel of adjudicators, let me ask you, what if you were in this situation? What if you were stranded with 3 of the most people that you loved to death? What if you were stranded with them? What would you do after 19 days of no hope from the government? Without wasting any more time, a very good morning to the panel of adjudicators, members of the floor, side opposition, and accurate timekeeper. Now, before I begin my debate, there are a few things that I need to reset up because government failed to provide us with enough information. The first thing is that we need to put into perspective is that where are they? They are in the middle of the ocean. They say that they could just skin these people alive with what tools exactly, ladies and gentlemen? They just finished getting out of a shipwreck, and now you expect them to have the tools and skills to perfectly skin someone to death. Actually, not to death, as their side has said that they would skin this person and eat their skin. Which honestly, ladies and gentlemen, do you think that is morally justified? Do you think that skinning someone is worse than killing someone? We as opposition agree that skinning someone is much worse than killing someone. Now, we also have to put into perspective that it's the 19th day. I will take you in a sec, sorry. It's the 19th day, meaning that there were 18 days before they decided to kill this 3rd man. Meaning that they had ample of time to decide if they should or shouldn't, and meaning that they had ample amounts of time to wait for rescue from said government. Now, moving on to the 3rd thing is, one thing that government might say that they instinctively planned to kill this 3rd person, maybe out of rage, maybe out of spite. But there are 3 scenarios that would have likely, I'll take a few at one second. There are 3 scenarios that would have likely taken down in this situation. Number 1 is that since they said that it is planned, maybe in this situation, because it never stated, maybe this killing could have been consented. Maybe this 3rd person would have consented to his death for reasons that he alone will know. Maybe this 3rd person was sick to the point where he knew that he was a burden to their crew, and therefore he realized that he was not helping them in any perspective, so he consented to his murder. But before I go into the other 2 reasons, sure.
We've already said in our first slide that decided means to think carefully about the different possibilities that are available and chose one of them. And in this motion right now, they chose most probably the worst option.
So you're saying that with the definition of decided means they planned, right? Well, I already stated in my first one, if you really want to go with the narrative that they planned this for 18 days, then there is a huge possibility that it was consented to. There was a huge possibility that this 3rd man consented because they planned, remind you, for 18 days according to government, they planned this sort of killing. I'll take a PO in a second. Then even if that was the case, there are 2 other reasons that kids could have gone down in this planned thing. Number 2 is self-defense. Maybe this 3rd person, you never know, this 3rd person might have been, what to say, a burden to them in sense that this man was stealing all their food, or this man was simply put someone they knew themselves couldn't work with. If 2 people can agree on killing this one person, then this one person had to have done something wrong. In the last scenario is that these men just decided on a coin flip. Decided can mean anything. So they may have decided on a coin flip. They coin flipped and decided which of them would pay their sacrifice towards their cause. But before I move on any further, sure, I'll take your POI.
But first of all, the motion stated that only the 2 men decided the 3rd man. And also also, I would like to state that just because the third man did something wrong, doesn't mean that it's justifiable for two men to kill the man. And there's no way it's consensual because only two men discuss about it.
Government has never heard of the word insanity and has never heard of the daily limit of 14 days without food will cause someone to go insane. Because mind you, these men were in a survival situation. And yes, even if these two men decided and planned this assassination, you have to realize, panel of adjudicators, that these men weren't mentally stable. And that is actually a reason in the law that is justified. No, I won't take your POI. That is justified to killing someone. If you kill someone under the claims of insanity, which is clearly proven, easily proven by the fact that they stayed on this boat for 19 days with lack of water and lack of food, it is proven that any normal human being would go insane in this scenario, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I'll be moving on to the burdens that we have to prove today. Now, we as opposition have to prove that even in these three scenarios that I have mentioned on how it's consensual, or if it's a coin flip, or if they were insane and it was on, they hated this man, that we still think that it's morally justified. Government, on the other hand, has to prove to us that self-preservation and continuing one's life is morally wrong, even if you are on the brink of death. Today, our government's stance of today will be on how there is no jurisdiction insofar as the government has failed you. As opposition's 3 points of today will be on how it's a crime of necessity, meaning that it is allowed under the law because of the scenario that you're put in. Number 2 is on alternativism. And number 3, argument number 3 is on the accessibility argument. Now I'll be moving on to my first argument on how the crimes of necessity and how the government failed you as a person. We all know that the government has this obligation with its people. You expect the government to protect you in a life-threatening situation. Say a fire, you expect firefighters to come and save you. Say in a stranded scenario, you expect rescue teams to save you. Sorry, no. And so therefore, we pay these sort of social contracts like taxes so that we trust the government, and therefore this trust, if broken, does not give the government any power. And in this scenario, 19 days, ladies and gentlemen, has passed. The government is issued 72 hours. This is called the golden hours. 72 hours to legally save somebody before any of their decisions can be considered abided by the law. These 72 hours is 3 days, mind you, ladies and gentlemen. And how long did they have to survive for? 19 days plus a few, because they didn't work rescue immediately after they killed the person. Now what does it mean here? I won't take your POI. What does it mean here? Well, it means that the government broke the trust with its people. So therefore, if the government can't hold their end of the bargain, then they've already stated in many of their law books that if the government cannot hold this burden of protecting its people, then its people are allowed to make these sorts of critical decisions in order to preserve their life. Now, moving on with my last reason is why it was justified exactly. Well, because there were no alternatives, ladies and gentlemen. No normal human being would, if given the tools and given the alternatives, would resort to murder. So these people were clearly driven to insanity. There was no other alternative. There was no other choice of food. Government can't just sit there and say, oh, maybe you could have skinned them, maybe you could have just started fishing. But you have to be in that scenario to understand what they were going through, and what they were probably going through was insanity, ladies and gentlemen. So therefore, we believe that it wasn't against the law because of these failure of the government, because the government failed to protect them with these said laws that they put in place. So therefore, we believe as side opposition that these people should not be held accountable with the stance of there is no jurisdiction insofar as if the government failed you. With that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Alright, thank you very much, Mr. Daniel.
Time taken by the first opposition speaker, 8 minutes 30
How much Daniel being too much to deliver his speech?
Okay, I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, this is quite a fun debate, right? Because with this motion, you can make all sorts of assumptions, like the leader of opposition made. They might have a contour. The third person might be the third man might be causing the both other men to drown in some way. However, in the motion, ladies and gentlemen, decided to kill, we define it as to think carefully about the different possibilities that are available and choose one of them, ladies and gentlemen, to think carefully. So really, with insanity, ladies and gentlemen, like the assumption that the opposition has made, can people, insane people, think carefully? I think not, ladies and gentlemen. But before all that, good afternoon, I greet to all the members of the floor. I am the Deputy Prime Minister, and in my speech, I am going to rebut some of the points made by the Leader of Opposition, and provide 2 more points to support my government's case. Okay, first of all, something we have to acknowledge from the Leader of Opposition speech is that they've made a lot of assumptions about this third man, but never settled on one. Ladies and gentlemen, we have already set the case, right? We've already said that these 2 people, once again, decided, the meaning of decided is to think carefully, alright, discussed and decided to kill the other man, the third man, right? So with that, the third man did not know that these 2 other people were going to kill. These 2 other men were going to kill him.
Your sir?
Yes.
Are you aware that decisions can be made on any time? And in your fact, the definition of decision you made can mean anything. Because decisions, you are pinpointing the exact thing that you want.
Thank you.
You want.
Okay, but I'm sorry, but you did not redefine our definitions. So we assume that you accept our definitions. I'm so sorry, Leader of Opposition. You fail to understand that. Okay, so now moving on. They also said that this third man might have also killed out of rage. They might have killed this third man out of rage. That was another assumption made by the Leader of Opposition. But then they say after 90 days that after 90 days they were doing it out of desperation. So many assumptions came out of the Leader of Opposition, but they never settled on one. Even though we've already set the case, they didn't decide to redefine our definitions of the motion. So therefore, we assume that they accept our definitions. Okay, now on to the third part of the government, which is morality. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, think about the third man. Think about how you would feel as the third man, right? When 2 other people on the raft with you discussed among themselves that they decided to kill you, how would you feel when you were the one who was chosen to die? How would you feel when you knew that your life mattered little compared to the 2 other men, ladies and gentlemen, and the third man? Right? Yes, you can argue that the other 2 men, the 2 other men would also, you can argue that the 2 other men could also, you could say that the 2 other men also wanted their life to be valued just the same as the third man, right, ladies and gentlemen? However, as we have said, there are still alternative ways. Who's to say that? One, they also said that they decided on the coin toss, so really a coin is on the boat. Who's to say that there was a knife on the boat? Like, right, ladies and gentlemen, we also on the government side would like to make some assumptions. Who's to say that there aren't knives on the boat? Who's to say they can't bite their own skin off? As we stated from my Prime Minister, they could have acted out of desperation. So really, any act of desperation that includes that reaches the point of murder, there are still other alternatives, right? So really, from our team stand, to reiterate, we think that all human life is equal, and therefore these 2 other men should be held accountable and should be charged with murder. However, as my Prime Minister has stated, we will not charge them with a full sentence murder. As we understand, as the government, they were acting out of desperation. Yes.
If a poor mother goes into a store just to buy food and medications for their children, are you going to charge them for stealing it?
Well, yes, obviously, because stealing under the law is wrong, right? Think about the shop owner. They invested their money and just for it to be stolen by another man, ladies and gentlemen. We don't think that's correct, or that's moral, or that's wrong, or that's correct, because that is the stand that side of opposition has decided to take today. Okay. Now I would like to move on to my speech. If we don't bring justice to this third man, ladies and gentlemen, you're basically saying you value the lives of these 2 other men more, right? Because you won't hold these 2 other men who decided once again to kill this third man And now you're saying that you don't want to prosecute them, to charge them with murder because they're acting out of desperation. However, as we stated, we still look our mechanism is which way we still charge them with murder, with not with full sentence, right? And then now let's go back to the third man. The third man, right, might have had a family, right? The third man might have had their own dreams and ambitions. Now think about it this way, ladies and gentlemen. Think about how if this third man was your brother. Think about how if this third man was your son. Think about how if this third man was your best friend who you entrusted to for life, ladies and gentlemen. Think about that. Would you want this third man's life to be valued under the other two men, ladies and gentlemen? We think not. So now another point that I would like to make is that if these two men were not charged with murder, ladies and gentlemen, other people will take advantage of these loopholes in our system. Right, because when you make no charges towards these people, right, even though we acknowledge that they've acted out of desperation, this act will go unpunishable. And with this, evil people can take advantage of this exception and can take advantage of this exception and conduct their own nefarious act. Imagine this scenario, ladies and gentlemen. Two people, Shirley and Amy. Shirley, okay, is a cannibal, and Amy is her friend. So when Shirley and Amy were, for example, locked into a room where Shirley locked the room on her own and said that, oh, we're locked in this room. We might not have any way to fight. We don't have any way to get out, right? We might not have any way to get out, right? So because of this, Shirley, as they said, once again can plead insanity and can kill Amy and eat her without going unpunishable, even though the intention of Shirley bringing Amy into that room is to cannibalize and do morally wrong acts, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, to reiterate our stance, we on the government side understand that we value human life equally, right? I would like to reiterate from the Prime Minister, we understand that the acts that the two men have done were both were both done during times of desperation, and therefore we will not charge them with full sentence murder. That is all from my speech.
Alright, thank you so much, Daniel.
There's a reason why we don't prosecute individuals who steal baking products. There's a reason why we don't prosecute individuals who steal food. Because we recognize that they are in different circumstances. They were put there unjustly. We think that they didn't choose to be poor. Yeah, sure, you can see that it's unfair to the shop owners. But then did these individuals really choose to be poor? We think that they had to make that choice out of desperation. We think it's the government's failure in allocating resources that was the reason why they had to make that decision in the very first place. That's why there are laws set in status quo. There are laws set for crimes of necessities, because we recognize the circumstances that they are placed in. There are two things I'll do here in my speech. Firstly, I'll give you several rebuttals, and second, I'll bring up the second and third argument coming from our side of the house. Second, on utilitarianism, and thirdly, on accountability. But before that, a very good evening to all members of the floor. Firstly, then on rebuttals. Because notice that how government tried to set these ideas to say that, oh, they're not going to impose a life sentence. But here's the difference, panel, and we think that this is one that's important. The moment as to you choosing to prosecute these individuals, regardless of what sentence you give them, regardless whether or not it's first-degree murder, there already is a black mark on your name. Society will see you as a murderer. They will label you as a murderer, given that you are charging them with first-degree murder. What then does it mean? It means that it's going to be effect on your livelihood. Means that society is likely going to see you as a murderer. You're unlikely to get jobs. We think that on your side of the house, you're being shunned away from a lot of opportunities. You're unable to get jobs, even though it wasn't your fault that you were in that shipwreck. Even though it wasn't your fault that the government didn't come and save you. We think at that point of time where you can't get jobs, can't feed your families, we think that you are placed in that position, and we think that this one that's extremely unfair to you in the very first place. And additionally, in terms of like how society sees you as a murderer, we think that this is you being placed in very unfair circumstances. But before that, I'll take a few hours.
Society would understand that these acts were made out of desperation. Compared to a murderer who killed people on their own accord because they wanted to, how don't you think that society won't see these two people as equal?
If it's true that society understands, then why then do you still want to label them as murderers? Why then do you still want to charge them with why then do you still want them to undergo that sentence in the very first place? But furthermore, we think that you also live in a utopia, like you're quite privileged to see that people always understand. We think the label murderer, the first thing that comes to mind is that you murdered a person and you murdered that person intentionally. We don't think society is likely going to empathize with you in the very first place. Even if they do, we think that's in a very minute cases. Secondly, they say that you're going to murder these individuals premeditatedly. They say that you're going to murder them out of rage. We don't think that this is true. Because if it's true that they were going to murder them out of rage, they very much well know that there are check and balances systems set in place. Where if they were to murder someone, they will be held accountable to the law. Thus, we don't see why there's incentive to want to murder your friend in the very first place. We think that they probably did this out of desperation, and we think that government also agreed that they did this out of desperation. The first thing then, in terms of our first argument, in terms of our second argument on utilitarianism, we think that in times of crisis, we ought to prioritize the option that's able to grant the best outcome. We ought to prioritize the option that's able to ensure the maximum survival, to ensure that more people are able to survive. How then does this apply? We think that panel, here's the crucial way that we give it to you. Do you want 3 individuals to all die, or would you rather have 2 individuals live? We think that if they want to talk about families, would you rather a child lose one family lose a father, or would you rather have all 3 families lose their father? We think the harm is far worse on your side of the house. But furthermore, we don't think that we can make the assumption to see that it's an unconsented decision. Maybe that individual was one that's weak. Maybe it was a collective idea to want to have that, to make that sacrifice. We don't think that they can come up here and dictate their decision. But even if it was unconsented, and here's where you engage in your best case scenario to see that it was unconsented choice, we have to ask the question here: did these 3 individuals consent to be on a shipwreck? Did they consent to be in the middle of the ocean? We say no, they didn't. We humans don't want to be put in tragedy. We think that you're put in that position unjustly because of certain different circumstances. We think that the person who is in fault here is the government, because given that we already gave you 19 days, you still failed to save your own citizens. We think that's a failure on the government. We don't think that they can prosecute you on that basis. But before that, I'll take a few items.
Well, thank you so much for firstly, the law doesn't care what circumstances you're in. Once you violate the law, you committed the crime. It doesn't matter what circumstances you're in or what kind of situation you're in. Once you violate the law, you're wrong.
I think you completely disregarded our argument in terms of why there are laws for crimes of necessities. The government understands that you have been put into that position unjustly because of unforeseen circumstances. They didn't choose to be in the middle of the ocean, but even then, we also have to push on the idea to say that they didn't consent to be in that position in the very first place. But also, we think it's very much unfair for you to prosecute someone even though they did not actively want to take that decision. They had to take that decision because it was one that was out of desperation. The second argument here then on accountability. There are 2 parts under this. Firstly, on holding the government accountable, and secondly, holding the society accountable. And we think that this directly clashes with government's point in terms of how people will take advantage of the system. We'll tell you why this is untrue and why this won't happen. But firstly, then in terms of holding the government accountable, we think that if you want to hold the government accountable for not saving you in that period of time, that 19 days, we think that you have to be alive in order to hold them accountable in the very first place. But we also want to talk about what it looks like in the long run if you let the government, prosecute you. What it will look like then is that you're allowing the government to scapegoat their responsibilities, to scapegoat the fact that they failed to protect you in that 19 days. We think, I won't take any more. We think that you're allowing them to scapegoat their responsibilities. It looks like in the future, if they fail to save an individual, they'll probably just prosecute, and if they fail to save you and you murdered your friend for sustenance, they'll probably frame you as a murderer and try to scapegoat their responsibilities to the government and their obligation to you We think that
Go
this is
ahead,
one
please.
that is morally wrong, and we think it's one that is unfair. But in terms of like holding society accountable, we think that the check and balances systems are still set in place. Because if you were to commit a crime unjustly, if you were to commit a crime, you will still be perjured. You will still be held accountable. But the unique exception here in today's case is the fact that you had no other alternatives. You did this out of necessity, out of survival instincts, right? Things in an intrinsic human nature to want to preserve yourself, to prioritize self-preservation. We think that these crimes, the check and balance systems will still exist in the status quo because we will very carefully analyze these crimes of necessities and analyze the circumstances that these individuals are placed in. We don't think that they will be able to take advantage of this system. So what did we tell you from all of our speeches? We told you that you shouldn't be prosecuted because you are put there unjustly. You didn't choose to be like in the middle of the ocean. You were put, and furthermore, we think that the government didn't fulfill the obligation to you. You trusted that government. You trusted that they will save you. But even after 19 days, they failed to show up. They failed to save you from your dire situation. We think it's just for you to take the best course of action to prioritize your survival. We think it's better to have 2 individuals surviving rather than all individuals not surviving, right? We think that if the government has failed to save you, we think it's one that's justified to prioritize your own self-sustenance. Thus, we want to end with our stance that there is no jurisdiction insofar that the government has failed to protect you. Thus, for all these reasons, we're very proud to oppose.
Thank you, Cheryl. Libra Khadija binti Raja.
Can you hear my voice clearly? Okay. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Thank you to Madam Chairperson. Salutations I would like to give to the honorable judges, Chile's timekeeper, wise members of the government, worthy opponents of the opposition, and members of the floor. We are here today to debate the motion that has been given to us, a lengthy motion, which in the end is boiled down to we would prosecute the 2 men who have committed murder to murder charges. Now, our stand as the government is that we value all human life equally. And therefore, once these 2 men have taken the life of the 3rd man, it is murder. Okay. So my job as the 3rd speaker is that I will be addressing the flaws made by the opposition, will be rebutting all their rebuttals and their points, and strengthen the arguments made by my team members. So first of all, the flaws is that this debate, as proposed by the opposition, has been solely made out of assumptions. We, the government, have already set the case line, and what happens during these times? There are boundaries, you set the perimeters. These 3 men do not know each other. And for the opposition to simply say that just because the 3rd man was the burden, they were justified in killing him. Just because the 3rd man served no use to the 2 other people, his life was no longer meaningful to the other 2 men. Do you think this is right? They preach about humanitarianism, but at the same time, they do not value the life of the 3rd man. The 3rd man also wanted to live. You did say that they were put in this situation unjustly. They did not want to experience this shipwreck. The 3rd man did not want to be murdered. The 3rd man did not want to have his life taken and use that as sustenance to fuel the other 2 men. Now I will be talking about the points made by the 2nd speaker of the opposition. She said something regarding humanitarianism and how it's unjust for them to be in this situation and therefore it is justified for them to commit this act of murder. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I wholeheartedly disagree. Why are laws implemented in the first place? Laws are implemented so that we can punish people who do wrong. Once we let people who do crimes go off scot-free without consequences, this will make other people who do these same crimes think the same way. So let's say the POI given by the 3rd member of the opposition. A poor mother goes to a shop and then steals something. Is it still illegal? Yes, theft is still illegal and punishable by law. Just because that your circumstances are not preferable does not mean you do not abide under the law. This is a human right. We are protected under the law, and that means we have to abide the law and the consequences and the punishments that follow after you disregard these laws. If you only take in the fact that they were starving, that they were desperate, and therefore their murder was justified, then what about the other murders that will happen in this same circumstance, ladies and gentlemen? The third man might have had a family. The third man was still connected to other people, and yet they have already disregarded this fact. You preach about humanitarianism and empathy and how the circumstances are not preferable to you, and yet at the same time you highlight that this man's life is less valuable than the two other members on the raft, yes?
Government talks about how this one man could have had a family, but those other two men also could have had a family. So does government prefer that we save these two, or just let all three of them starve to death?
Thank you, Mr. UI. Well, we did say that in our case study, we've set very specific circumstances of this. So there are still ways for all three men to survive. You did say that there are no tools. How do you know that? You keep making assumptions, and so we can say hypothetically, they use the tools they do have on the boat, and they do cut off the flesh of the men. There's an alternative to save all three members on the boat, even though that they will come out severely injured. At least the chances of them coming out all alive is higher. Ladies and gentlemen, we the government believe that these three men could have all lived and survived this incident, but that's not what happened, isn't it? One person on the boat died. We acknowledge that. And they have decided to kill this man. It was premeditated. They planned this. They had 19 days to think of this. And so, the act of murdering alone is a crime and should be charged. Next,
Your Honor,
she said that, yes,
can government give me a just reason? If these three men had tools to say skin themselves or do whatever these tools, then why would they resort to cannibalism? No normal sane person would resort to cannibalism.
thank you very much, Mr. Yohai. You said that no normal sane person would resort to this, yes? But in the motion stated today, they decided, and it has already been said by my first and second speaker, that you need a rational, clear flow of thought to make these decisions. They were saying when they made this, ladies and gentlemen. Now moving on, the rebuttal made by the second speaker is that society will brand you as a murderer. Yes, because you murdered someone. If you steal something, you're a thief. If you murder someone, you're a murderer. That's on you. And we, the government, have the punishment for this so as to decrease the rates of this happening. That's why laws are here in the first place. And she also said there are incentives to murder people. Ladies and gentlemen, there are incentives to murder people. What are the incentives to murder people? You can be as hungry as you want, you can be as poor as you want, but that does not justify the act of you taking away a person's life. That is what the opposition is preaching for. That it's okay to kill someone just because you're having difficulty. No, ladies and gentlemen, it is not. It is immoral, and that is what we are fighting against, yes?
The fact that you're in that position was the state's failure to provide a fast and efficient rescue team. Why then is it okay for the government to penalize these individuals?
Oh, thank you for your eye. Well, so the government did fail to see these people. We will acknowledge that. But we are trying to fix this situation by charging them with murder. We know they did something wrong. Do you think we're going to let them go scot-free? No, they have consequences. And the consequences to this action is that we are charging them with murder. We understand that they were in a desperate situation, ladies and gentlemen. That is why we are not offering them the life sentence. We are offering them that they are still going to be prosecuted because they did still commit a crime. But because it was in a place of necessity and desperation, those charges will not be serious. So, to end my case, I would just like to reaffirm my stand as the government that all life should be valued equally, no matter how useful, how privileged, or how poor, starving, and how difficult it is for the people living. All of these lives should be taken seriously at an equal level. And with that, I hope this motion, I strongly believe that this motion should be accepted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura.
Time taken by the third government speaker, 7 minutes 58 seconds.
Panel of adjudicators, imagine if you are just resting in your own home, but someone barges into your home with a knife coming for you. You choose to swing your baseball bat at him. You realize that you fall down to the ground and he is dead and he isn't waking up anymore. Will you still charge him with murder? We tell you no. This is a case that we have already been seeing in all this law, and especially in Singapore. This case happened and they choose to let the guy go because it is an act of self-preservation and an act of self-defense. This has been consistently brought up throughout the entire bench. We think this has been neglected by under the side of government. We think we need to hear some response, but we think even if they respond in their reply speech, it's too late. But moving on, I think here's where we need to understand the reason why laws are even set in place are because it is to protect the people, not only the elites, but also those individuals who are underprivileged, those individuals who are underrepresented. And I think that those individuals who are already suffering from all those injustices, for example, like the unequal wealth distribution. Furthermore, there's a reason why the law book is so thick, and because there is a certain portion to describe the crimes of necessities that the government did not understand. Since government want to talk so much about the book of law, but yet they don't understand what the crimes of necessities are, I'm going to explain this to you in three aspects. Firstly, in terms of why it's justified for you to commit these crimes. Second, I'll tell you that whether or not them choosing this, the third person is one that's fair. And thirdly, I'm going to talk about the accountability and the loopholes that government wanted to mention. But before that, I have several responses and reframing that I want to make. Because under their side of the house, the only mechanism that they have an alternative was to say that, oh, you're going to be skinning them off. But here's how I'm going to deconstruct their mechanism and take down their entire case. Because we told you that firstly, the tools that you have on this like shipwreck is one is unsanitary, which means that you won't have like proper tools for surgery, and furthermore, we don't think that you are even qualified to be a surgeon to begin with. You are unable to stitch yourself after you like skin your own self, and furthermore, you don't have things like betadine or like antibacterial. We think the impact of this argument is to say that under their side of the house, those three individuals who decide to skin themselves will have massive blood loss, they will have an increased chance of infection, and they perpetrate more pain to these individuals because not only have they been starving for the past 18 days, but they have to now feel the pain of them skinning their own self without any like painkillers. Moving on then to my first argument in terms of like why is this one that's justified. Before I move on, sure.
So then you're saying it's better to kill a whole human being to take their whole life rather than do our alternative.
No, understand that under your side of the house is where you perpetrate all these harms, and furthermore we told you that under side of the house is one that is justified because it's a crime of necessity, and furthermore we're going to elaborate on this in terms of whether this is one, like the person that got the two men that decided whether or not this is one that's fair. Moving on first in terms of why this is justified, because we told you that in the motion itself it says that it's a 19-day, which means that the search and rescue team has failed to even help these individuals, and note that this search and rescue team have the obligation to help within this golden hour of 72 hours. Yet the government did not make sure that these individuals are safe, and therefore it is unjust for you to go and like penalize these individuals that you failed to protect to begin with. But furthermore, we need to understand that while you're in this shipwreck, food and resources are ones that are limited. So notice how within these circumstances, even let's say you're able to fish or you're able to like have like water supplies, these are ones that will deplete over time, and which means that under like the 19 days, these individuals are already like starving and they cannot proceed furthermore. And notice how that under their side of the house, there's already like 18 days that has passed, and yet they did not kill, they did not commit a murder, which means that these are individuals who are intrinsically not a murderer, and furthermore, these are people who are actually benevolent, these are individuals who are kind, they have no like motivation to kill you in the very first place. But furthermore, the reason as to why they are forced to do this was because they were left with no alternative. If they say, if government want to come here and say that, oh, this was premeditated and planned, why would they even wait for the 18 days, knowing the fact that these two individuals are already outnumbering that single person? We don't see this is one that's true from their side of the house. Moving on then to my second clash in terms of whether or not this is fair. But notice how we gave you two scenarios. Firstly, in terms of whether the third man might be uncooperative, not willing to share, and second, whether or not to use the most fair way, which is to use a coin flip. But first, let's talk about the scenario where it might not be that fair, about being how like these individuals might have like rage or like they might be uncooperative. Here, we need to understand that in these desperate circumstances, you might have individuals who are selfish, individuals who want to take all those food and drinks for their own self, which means under their side of the house, the third individual might be the one that's trying to cause everyone to die, and therefore it's because it's how like these two individuals are willing to share, they are not willing to have these third individuals pose an imminent threat. That's why they chose to eliminate it. I think this is one that's fairly justified because you do not want one individual to bring down your entire bunch of like teams. But moving on to my second thing to talk about like coin flip, which I think is the most fair characterization that both of us can agree. Because coin flip is one that is 50-50 chance, there's no biases in these circumstances. And even then, tell you that even if you are using coin flip, this is one that's justified because you have no more other alternative, and you would rather have like on a utilitarianism basis, we would rather have two individuals surviving rather than all three individuals dying. Because notice how these individuals, for example, if they have family, we would rather have at least one family set rather than all three families have to grieve. Meaning there's a far worse alternative under the of the house. We'd rather at least have some form of happiness for these individuals because it's one that's far more reparable. Before I move on my third question in terms of accountability, sure.
Thank you very much. But why is it justified for two insane person to kill an innocent person?
No, like our literary analysis was to prove to you as to why they're not insane, because the mere fact that they can wait for it, they did not even kill them after 18 days, just proves to you that they had to commit this murder because of act of desperation, and the fact that if they do not have this meal from their flesh, they cannot be born for the next 2 days to be rescued. This is the crucial analysis that you guys miss out on the motion itself. But moving on to my third question in terms of accountability. Here is where we have to understand about the principle of self-preservation. Because we told you, if you want to be able to like tell these other family members about how like this person who sacrificed themselves are one that is considered a hero, you first need to survive. But under their side of the house, when they choose to let all these three individuals die, we think that you're not able to tell this story, not able to say that this guy was a hero, he sacrificed himself. We think under their side of the house, people are more likely to be sad. We think that you are not able to get accountability. But moving on then in terms of accountability of society, where they say that, oh, we're going to have loopholes. But clearly this is untrue. But even if it's true that you're going to have people that's going to be taking like this as a play, like they are going to like misuse this opportunity, we still think that this just proves that there's further more incentive for the government to send these search and rescue teams as fast as possible, which we think will ultimately help society, meaning that you're more likely going to get saved. You don't have to wait 19 days like this scenario to begin with. But furthermore, under their side of the house, we told you why is it that you have to charge them with murder if it's an act of desperation? Because the moment you choose to charge them with murder, they will be labeled as murderer. Even if you're like going to charging them with first-degree murder, in society, they don't say, oh, you are proved you are a person that murdered someone because you're a shipwreck. You will often be labeled just as a murderer, and it will always appear on your profile no matter where you go. We tell you this is one that ultimately harms those individuals, because assuming if these individuals want to find jobs, they are unable to do so because of how their resume has to always be linked up with a murderer. We think the moment when these employees like do like a background check on you, these individuals will be harmed. I think under their side of the house, they aren't able to prove to us as to why is it that crime of necessities shouldn't like be charged. For all these reasons, I'm very proud of the post.
Alright, thank you very much, Daryl. The reply speech by the opposition. That's the second speaker, Cheryl Tan.
It's incredibly disappointing to see government come up here misinterpreting our case, saying that we have made a lot of assumptions, given that we have already engaged in all dimensions of today's debate from different perspectives. Thus, what will I do in my reply? We'll sum up this debate from different perspectives. So, government bench, please listen closely. There are 4 things I'll do here in my speech. Firstly, on choice. Second, on alternatives. Thirdly, on obligation of the government. And fourthly, on accountability. Firstly then, on choice, we engage in 3 different aspects: on consented choice, on unconsented choice, and lastly on conflicts where it's decided randomly. Firstly then, on consented choice, what did we tell you? Tell you that it could possibly be one that was a collective idea where they all agreed that they want to sacrifice this individual for the susceptibility of the 2 other individuals. And perhaps these individuals and that person who was murdered actually agreed to that choice, they actually consented maybe they were weak at that point of time and they couldn't carry on longer. So maybe it was one that was consented, thus we think that it's one that's justified. But secondly, that even if it was one that was unconsented, and this was the case the government hinged the entire case upon, and thus were engaged in the best case scenario. We think that even if it was one that was unconsented, we think that it's still justified. Because both sides did not consent to be in that position in the very first place. They didn't consent to be in a shipwreck. They didn't consent to be in that tragedy in the very first place. So we think that even if they were to come up here to say that if they are insane and they have to be prosecuted, we think that they were not inherently insane. They were insane because out of desperation, out of 19 days, no one still came to save them. But also, even if it was one that was unconsented, we still think that it's one that is good. Because on the basis of utilitarianism, we are able to ensure the maximum outcome, at least on our side of the house. We are able to have 2 individuals surviving, as compared to the other side of the house. We are unsure whether or not all that 3 individuals will be saved in the very first place. But lastly, then, in terms of the coin tip, we think that this is one that is still justified, given that it's one that is randomly chosen. We think that no one should be held accountable for murder in the very first place. Secondly, then on alternatives, we have 4 alternatives in this debate. Firstly, you don't do anything like what government is trying to push for. Like all 3 families were stuck to mourn the death of all these 3 individuals. Secondly, you skin these individuals and you commit cannibalism, which is what government is trying to propose. We think that their alternative is one that is far more gruesome. This panel, we want you to imagine being skinned alive. We think that you'll be put into a lot of pain. We think it's far worse than having an immediate death. But thirdly, then, in terms of like waiting and not doing anything at all, we think that because there is a sense of uncertainty, we're uncertain when that help is going to come, we're uncertain when that aid is going to come, we think that is also not a viable option. But lastly, the option that we choose to advocate for, because of how we think that murdering that one person is one that is just. Because at least we don't like sacrifice all 3 individuals. At least we still have to have 2 individuals living on our side of the house. Thirdly, then on the obligation of the government, what do we tell you here? We tell you that people put their trust in the government, and we trust the government to protect us and to give us aid when we need it. Thus, we think that if we really gave them 19 days for the government to come and save us, yet they fail to do so, we don't think that they can use it as a basis to prosecute us on the basis of self-sustenance, but also living laws were designed to protect people. There are laws set in place to protect individuals who commit crimes of necessity. But what does it look like on their side of the house? In the long run, we think that the government is likely going to scapegoat their responsibilities. And if you were to commit something out of self-sustenance, we think that the government is going to pin the blame onto you. But lastly, then on accountability, we tell you that you can't just say that, oh, we won't give them the life sentence, or rather, we'll just give them like 1 year imprisonment. You still think that you're still labeled as a murderer, there is still a black mark on your name, it still means that you're going to have a much harder time to get job opportunities in society. We think you're still going to be shunned away from society, Thus, we think that there is no jurisdiction insofar that the government has built you a very proud circle.
To give his reply speech.
Okay, I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel of educators, the common question between the government and the opposition is regarding the value of human lives. Oppositions believe that just because you face difficulty, you may murder and it's okay. Whereas the government believes that a crime is a crime and under the law and no matter your circumstances. The principle of self-preservation, you can be as moral as you want with your attention, you will still be prosecuted. Why is this the case, ladies and gentlemen? As we've stated time and time again on our government side, because another person's life has been taken. You devalue this other person's life less than the other 2 men on the boat, on the raft, ladies and gentlemen. It is not that we don't acknowledge your dire situation, ladies and gentlemen. We do. As we've said before, we will charge them still with murder. However, we won't be giving them this full sentence. We won't be giving them the full sentence. Right? However, you must also know that there are always consequences to your actions. This is what is called the cause and effect. The reason why these 2 men will be charged with murder and are labeled murderers is because fundamentally they are. So now, what have we proven to you on government side, ladies and gentlemen? To summarize, 1, the law doesn't exclude starvation, as it is still a murder. Because at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, as we have stated time and time again, murder is still murder. It is still the act of taking someone else's life, no matter the circumstances, no matter how desperate, no matter how dire the situation is. Because to reiterate, we on government side value all human life as equal. Moving on to our second point, where there are still alternatives, again, we're making assumptions, where these men have the tools to be able to skin themselves. Opposition side states that skinning themselves is gruesome, but once again, we think that by skinning themselves, at least all three of these men will be able to live, ladies and gentlemen. So on to my third point, which is the morality, which the government side hasn't engaged with, by the way, and the opposition side hasn't engaged with, by the way, which is how we think about the third man, how you would feel in the position of the third man, where these two other people on the raft, that has been staying on the raft with you for 19 days, that discussed among themselves and decided to kill you, ladies and gentlemen. How would you feel that you were the one who was chosen to die, to sustain and fuel the other two? Okay, so lastly, our fourth point, which is the evil people will be able to find loopholes in our system. Once again, to reiterate, if we do not prosecute these two men after they've killed this third man, ladies and gentlemen, the evil people will start to take this to their advantage, as I've stated before with the example that I gave with Shirley and Amy, ladies and gentlemen. So at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, we on the government side are very